Hi, my name is Father Tony Melton. I'm the vicar at Christ the King Anglican Church in Marietta, Georgia. And this is the first video in a series called A Theology of Vocation. There is an intro video, and if you have not watched that, it's in the YouTube playlist, but it kind of gives a preface and an overview for this whole series. But this series will be in 7 parts, and this video is on the first part of that, which is a look at the human vocation, specifically what our vocation is as human beings in the earth. And the next one is going to be on manhood and womanhood. Then after that, marriage, vocation, and then the diaconate. We'll also discuss the lay ministry of deaconess, priesthood, and the episcopate, and that'll be the 7 series. Marriage and celibacy are the same, or will be in the same video. So it's just a little bit of an overview about what we're going to be covering. Again, today is on the vocation of being human. The question we're going to be asking is, what does it mean to be a human? Why did God make us? Why are we here? And what are we supposed to be doing? How do we fit within this story of the world? These are important questions, and without good answers, life becomes pointless. We seek mere pleasure because we have no purpose, but we were made for a purpose. And in this video, I'll teach you about the human purpose, or what's often called the human vocation. For a theology of vocation, Genesis 1 through 3 is like a gold mine. Get used to us spending a lot of time in these passages over the next 7 videos. I'm going to read you a passage that we're going to be discussing a lot today from Genesis 1, verses 26 through 27, or 26 through 29. It says, "And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat." Now there's a lot there, but I bolded a few phrases that will be important for this teaching. We're going to start with verse 28, since these are a little bit easier. What do we see here? We see that God blesses Adam and Eve and instructs them to do several things. He instructs them to be fruitful and multiply, replenish or fill the earth, and to subdue it. Now, before we talk about each of these tasks, we should notice that they all fall under the heading of dominion. You'll notice in verse 26 that the word dominion is mentioned. It's the only used in that verse to describe what humans are to do. It is repeated in verse 28 after the other specific tasks are mentioned. So, dominion is the general human task. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, replenish it, subdue the earth. These are all ways that humankind is to take dominion. It's important for us to remember the relationship between these two words. They mutually inform the others. For example, if dominion is seen as just another task in the list, then it can be separated from being fruitful and multiplying. This would be bad for our understanding of fruitfulness, and it would also be bad about our understanding of dominion. With the former, if we saw fruitfulness without dominion in it, we might think that our job is to have children simply for the joy and fun of it, detached from its larger dominion purpose. If we were to see dominion without its specified way of taking dominion as being fruitful, we might conceive of having dominion as being too militaristic or aggressive. So we can see in this context, and we'll talk about this soon, that there are two general categories that we get about our human vocation from this passage. And one of them is a general domestic vocation. That having dominion is more domestic and arboreal, or having to do with a garden or farming, than it is militaristic or ideological. To make it even more clear, we might ask the questions, what are we supposed to do as humans? The answer is take dominion. How are we supposed to take dominion? The answer, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it. There are many layers of meaning to these words, and I'd love to see you who are listening draw some of those significances out in the comment section and in the discussion that happens through that. For this video, I'm going to hit what should be the obvious notes. I say should because I do not believe that the wider church, especially American evangelicalism, has grasped the significance of our human mandate and vocation. God told us to be fruitful and multiply. First and foremost, this means that humans are supposed to have children, lots of children. We will get into the relationship between marriage and children in the fourth video. For now, know that it is God's will for humans to procreate. There are many lies told to us by our popular culture and so-called social scientists about children. Fears about overpopulation are not only scientifically wrong, but they're also logically wrong. Hypothetically, if we were facing problems of overpopulation, then not having a lot of children will not help. The population of the earth is not going to go down. It's only going to go up. Having less children will only slow the hypothetical inevitable. Logically, there's only two ways out of this hypothetical problem. Either mass population control, like Hitler did, which is unimaginably wicked, or banking that the babies that are born, educated, formed within this age of incredible knowledge, will fulfill the human mandate and replenish and subdue the earth. Harness its potentials. Find new ways to live harmoniously with nature and with others. Those who are scared of overpopulation don't have the faith and courage to live out their human vocation. The solutions are in life, not in death. We are called to fill and multiply. In this way, we replenish and subdue the earth, and this is how we exercise dominion. The second thing that we receive from the Adamic mandate is a general domestic vocation. Humans are, generally speaking, creatures of the home. These instructions that God gave in Genesis 1 were given to Adam and Eve, the first family. Their task was domestic. Have babies, make a home, make the earth more of a home for others. This general domestic vocation sets up an important value. There is hardly anything more important in the world than raising up children. Even those who are not blessed with children or who are called to celibacy participate in this general domestic vocation. They are called to be uncles and aunties, spiritual fathers, spiritual mothers. This will come up in the second and third video on manhood and womanhood. Somehow, in the conversation about occupation, modern culture has forgot Genesis 1 and 2, which sets up a familial vocation as being of the highest importance. Questions about work, money, geography are answered in light of our general domestic vocation. While these questions are not irrelevant, they are not at all on the same level of importance as what God has called us to in Genesis 1:28. The other two words that describe how we are to take dominion are replenish and subdue. Now, as I mentioned, the word replenish is translated as fill in almost every other translation except for the King James. Filling is what God did for every other thing. He made the sky and he filled it full of birds. He made the sea and he filled it full of swimming things. He made the earth, the ground, and he filled it full of grass and plants and beasts and creatures of the land. But with humans, he only makes two. And then he tells them to fill. What does this mean? It means that humans are supposed to expand the area of God's dominion over creation. They are to venture into places that are chaotic, untamed, dying, broken, war-torn, godless. And they are to bring life into it. We aren't supposed to just hunker down in our own little area and let the rest of the world disintegrate. Now, God made a garden, and he placed it in the east. It was called Eden. And he placed his two humans into it. Their purpose was not to stay in the garden, nor were they to leave the garden. What were they to do? They were to expand the garden. They were to expand its boundaries until the whole world was an arboreal temple. This is what is communicated in the word subdue. Just like God took the unformed chaos and brought into it order in Genesis 1, so too the humans are to take the unformed and chaotic wilderness and bring it into beauty and fruitfulness in Genesis 2. Until land is tamed, it cannot yield food for life. So all of our tasks in Genesis 1:28, they describe a familial and an agricultural dominion over the planet. The next verse we're going to look at is Genesis 1:27. Here we read that God made humans to be in his image. In theology, this is referred to as the Imago Dei, the image of God. It has many meanings, but the one that we will focus here on today is the priestly significance of the Imago Dei. I think that this is the one thing that kind of includes all of the other things that is talked about with Imago Dei. I think it's a helpful way of understanding what God is saying to us in Genesis 1:27. Adam and Eve are called to be priests of all creation. They are called to represent God to the creation, and they are called to represent the creation to God. They are called to name the creatures. They are called to take the things that God has made and manifest their glory through an act of art or poetry. We see Adam doing this when he writes the first poem about Eve. She is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. That doesn't ring like poetry in our language, but in his, I'm sure it was beautiful. God made the woman a mother, but it was Adam, the priest and poet, that named her Eve. For, it says, she was the mother of all the living. Because we were made in the image of God, we have a two-way purpose. Just like a priest, right here, it's hard to see because it's a little fuzzy, intentionally so. This is the altar at our church. And just like the priest stands at this step at the altar and faces the altar at certain points of the liturgy, and then at other times faces the people in the liturgy, so too humans have this two-facing task, this twofold task of bringing God's purposes to the earth, facing the creation, and also representing and presenting all of creation to God in an act of worship toward the altar. And just like a priest's job is to bring his parishioners before God in the fullness of their being and in the beauty of holiness, so too the human's job is to present all created things to God in an act of worship and thanksgiving. We call this Eucharisteo, and we call that the Eucharist. In this priestly vocation of all humanity, we also find another purpose worth mentioning, that of communion. In our priestly work, we are to walk with God in the cool of the day, just like Adam did in Genesis 2. Every human heart is the pivot point between God and the world. The turning over of God's word for the world and the world's poetic response to God, that is called prayer, contemplation. A good priest labors in his heart to treasure the mystery of bread become body and wine become blood. So too you should labor to see all the things as a gift of God's love toward you. Your food, your work, your health, your spouse, your neighbor, your pain, even your sickness, the good and the difficult, all things enfolded into a cosmic Eucharisteo. This is the vocation of being human. It is the constant inner mode as we pursue the outward task of dominion. So how does this priestly vocation play out practically? I'm sure you can guess what the general domestic vocation looks like practically. It looks like family, having a lot of kids, working to provide for them, trying to cultivate what we often call here at CTK in reference to the home, a nursery for heaven. But what does it look like to be a priest in a human sense, in a human vocation sense? Well, it means that the humans are called to look constantly for the divine fingerprints in creation and to call it out through prayer. Simply put, humans are called to pray because they are humans. Paul says that we are to pray constantly. You are called to be a poet. You are called to be a preacher. You are called to be a philosopher. You are called to glory in the glory of all that God has made as a human. When you do the dishes, your thoughts should be on God. When you eat, you are to give thanks for what God has made. When you punch the clock at work, you are to work as unto the Lord. When you return home, you are to be an image of the Father to your children and an image of the bridegroom to your wife. If you think that your job is to eat, work, sleep, and procreate, then you are barely half correct. Even the animals do that. You are called to live out the Imago Dei through communion, prayer, poetry, and philosophy. This means that we won't be mere consumers. We won't participate in things that degrade creation to its lower purposes. So, example, there's nothing inherently wrong with swear words, right? They're just a combination of letters and syllables. But so many swear words are the opposite of our priestly vocation. They take what is holy and they make it base or trivial. Or they take what is base and they try to call it holy. Now think about it. Sex is holy and beautiful. How many words, I'm not going to say them on this video, but how many words can you think of, swear words, that we have made to degrade sex in our hearts? I'll give you a minute. Well, not a minute, a few seconds. There's quite a few. Jesus is the most holy of all, and yet a common swear word is to trivialize his name or the name of God. Instead, we often will invert things. We even call human feces holy. So why am I talking about swearing? I assure you I'm no fundamentalist. I'm not even against all words that would be considered swear words. I point these out as examples because they are the opposite of what we are to do as human priests, a priestly vocation of being human. We are to take the holy things that God has made and we are to hallow them, to call them holy, to name them holy, to worship God with them as holy, to enjoy them as holy. To that which is unformed or twisted by sin, we are to not elevate it just by a spoken word, but we are to labor and to cultivate it like a farmer in an untamed field, to bring it to flourishing and righteousness. This is what humans are called to do. Gosh, there's so much more to say about these things, but these are short videos. My hope is that the comments will be rich with thought and conversation. Please do write a thought or a question in the comments below. Here are some ideas about what to write. First, what jumped out to you about this video? What was your main takeaway? Was there anything surprising or new that you learned? What are some other implications of our general domestic vocation or our priestly vocation that we discussed in this video? What are some other aspects of our human vocation that were not covered in this video that you see in Scripture? We certainly did not cover everything about what it means to be human. Have fun with the discussion, be thoughtful, be kind, and may God's peace be on you all. Thank you.